Thank you again, Superintendent O'Connell, for your words. So let's take a moment, if we can, and talk about this paper that the Campaign for High School Equity has put before you, High School Policy Reform, A Plan for Success. You all know all too well that the national and local statistics are depressing to some degree. The future seems uncertain as it relates to our students, particularly students of color, and whether or not they are graduating fully prepared for college and for work. Many of us find ourselves fairly saddened by where we are after all the sacrifices that have been made in public education over the last 40 years or so. I imagine those many Latino students who walked out of their schools in 1968 probably find themselves now wrestling with why we are still discussing many of the same issues. The notion in 1954 was largely that if we were only able to integrate the schools, then surely students of color would have unfettered access to the same kinds of quality and equity as other students. Unfortunately, that equity that we all were so desperate to attain still seems to elude us. And so we find ourselves today in a situation where we're still talking about the same problems. In many states, and indeed around the country, far too many Native American students, and in fact, far too many Southeast Asian students are rendered invisible by virtue of the way that we use and collect and act on data. It's as if those students are not even there. So there's a lot of work that we have to do. But given that you are here this afternoon, I'm just very, very happy because it's a clear expression of your recognition of the fact that we are facing a crisis and your commitment to do something about it. Before I go further, I wanted to recognize someone. I don't know if he is here. Is Mr. Manuel Gonzalez here? Let me tell you about Mr. Gonzalez. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. But when we put out the call for this event, we asked individuals who got notice of this to send us an RSVP via email. Excuse me. Mr. Gonzalez sent in an RSVP and included an explanation, included a note as to why he wanted to come and why this was so important to him. Mr. Gonzalez registered for himself and for his high school son. And he basically said that from where he sat, this was an extremely important issue for him both as a father, and it was extremely important for him when he looks at his son and considers what his son's future is likely to be. I thought that that was perhaps the most compelling expression of why this is so important. There are a number of things that the federal government can do. There are a number of things that state and local government and local educational practitioners can do. There are a number of things that all of us as civil rights organizations can do. But one of the most critical pieces has to do with what parents can do. And so I was just very, very glad to have gotten to receive Mr. Gonzalez's RSVP. Unfortunately, he, I guess, could not make it at the last moment. What I want to do very quickly, and then I will turn to our panelists, is to just talk to you a little bit about this policy paper that we are releasing for the first time here in the state of California. When we put this paper together, our goal was really threefold. On the one hand, we were seeking to demonstrate that there is indeed a pressing national crisis. It is a problem that disproportionately affects students of color, and is a problem that severely threatens the very sustainability of our economy and our democracy. But secondly, we wanted to draw attention or focus attention on California because of the wide social diversity in California and because of many of the things that California has attained, in somewhat stark contrast to a number of other states in terms of things that they have attained. And our intent was not to pick on California to any degree, but we recognize, and I think I said this a few months ago, I was at a CLSBA meeting, we recognize that there are things that Californians have done in a very positive way that outpace a number of other states. So we thought this was a very compelling kind of a backdrop for us to release this policy paper. And thirdly, we wanted to share with all of you a series of federal policy recommendations that we are convinced could fundamentally change the nature of this crisis. So in the paper before you, we first set out to provide what we think is ample evidence of the national crisis. We provide information related to the economic impact of the dropout and graduation rate problem, for example, and the degree to which our failure or our continued failure to address this crisis has really very severe consequences for our economy. We then moved on to attempt to demonstrate some of how this manifests itself in the state of California, and then we move on finally to talk about our 6 policy recommendations which are listed in your paper. And those policy recommendations, 1, making all students proficient and prepared for college and work. When you consider the fact that high schools are largely the gateway through to college or to work, it's absolutely critical that as a fundamental part of what we do in our high schools, that we ensure that every young person leaves school fully prepared to be successful in college and fully prepared to move into the world of work and stay. Secondly, holding high schools accountable for student success, for all student success. And you heard Superintendent O'Connell make mention of how important that is. Thirdly, redesigning the American high school. You will hear, and I'm sure many of you know this very, very well, that we live in and work in a system that was designed for a different time frame. And it is time, quite frankly, that we change the construct under which we educate many of our young people, particularly students of color. Number 4, provide students with excellent teachers and leaders. In other words, do everything we can to ensure that those students who need it most have access to the highest quality teachers and the highest quality leaders. Number 5, invest communities in student success. Do everything we can to involve in innovative ways, in deep ways, our community organizations, our parents, so that our entire communities are fundamentally oriented towards increasing student success. And finally, providing equitable learning conditions for all students so that Bobby or Sue or Joaquin don't have to attempt to learn in a classroom where the chairs and the desks and the boilers are falling apart, when just across town there are schools with books that were published in 2008 and the latest in furniture and clean drinking water and all of that sort of thing. I liken it to 2 students being asked to run a race, and one student wearing a fresh brand new pair of Nikes and the other student running in a pair of flip-flops. There's a fundamental sort of a mismatch right from the very start. So the bottom line is that from our perspective, our high schools are a critical link in the chain that ensures the survival of our basic democratic traditions and our international competitiveness. As such, it behooves us to fix our high schools.